Miller Knoll Design Perspectives. It's our monthly virtual event to discuss all things design. I'm so excited that so many of you could join. My name is Madeline Sullivan, Senior Manager of Contract Marketing at Miller Knoll, standing in for Jennifer Graham, who's on a nice vacation this week. Today, I am so excited to introduce Jonathan Olivares, Senior Vice President of Design at Knoll, and Signe Skødt, Head of Brand Communications at Muuto. Jonathan and Signe were both in Milan this year, and I can't wait to hear all about Knoll and Muuto at Milan Design Week. Hopefully, this will give us all a glimpse into Milan and the Salone event. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'd love to answer. Jonathan and Signe are happy to stop throughout their presentation and answer some questions real time as well. Or we can hold them all until the end, but whatever you feel comfortable with, please feel free to send in questions into the chat. So now I'd like to turn it over to Signe to talk about Muuto. And I am going to go in and share for you, Signe.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Signe, and I lead the brand communications team at Muuto in our headquarters in Copenhagen, Denmark. I'm really lucky to be involved in a lot of really exciting projects across the brand, and Milan is definitely one of the biggest moments of our year. So it's a project that really brings together so many talented and creative colleagues from across our entire company. So I feel really grateful that I get to be the one sitting here today and sharing the results of all of this hard work with you guys. And of course, there's nothing that quite compares to being there in person and, walking the streets of Milan and feeling the buzz of the design week. But I'll do my best to try and bring it to life for you guys and make it a lively experience. So we will be visiting 2 locations. We have the Muuto apartment and we have the Muuto garden. And let's begin in the apartment. So this year at the Milan Design Week, we returned to our apartment, which is actually also our permanent showroom at the Via Solferino 11, which is right in the heart of the Brera district, which is one of Milan's most design-rich and very atmospheric neighborhoods. It's really like the creative epicenter of Milan, and it's known for its cobblestone streets and historic buildings and art galleries, and has this really nice blend of classic Italian, but with a contemporary twist and culture. And during Design Week, the whole neighborhood just transforms into this crazy, buzzing, very busy, immersive world of design, basically. And we're really lucky that our showroom sits there in this building that's over 200 years old. And actually, much of its original architecture has been beautifully preserved. We're talking soaring ceilings, original terrazzo floors, and windows with very century-old glass that just gives this very unique, soft, rippling light into the rooms that really can change the atmosphere completely and makes everything very tactile and very alive. So there's a very nice contrast between this very historic Italian setting and the modern Scandinavian design language that we bring to it from Muuto. And we just really love that tension and like to work to make that become part of the story. And because it's our permanent showroom, we're actually able to build something that lasts beyond the design week. So we actually redesign it for each year for the week, but it continues as a working showroom for our sales managers and for press and for brand activations during the year. But this also means that it's the 3rd time that we were exhibiting in the apartment during Milan. So we really approached it with a very clear goal that we wanted to make this experience feel distinctly different from the previous years, and not just refresh it, but also kind of reimagine how we've done it so far. to create something, unexpected. So a little bit about Muuto first. At Muuto, we want to bring new perspectives to Scandinavian design. So we work with today's leading design talents to push forward this agenda of Scandinavian design with forward-thinking design in both furniture, lighting, and accessory categories. But we're also super interested in how design affects the way that people feel. So not just aesthetically, but actually psychologically as well. So that's why we've been engaging with this field called neuroaesthetics. And some of you might know this, but in short, neuroaesthetics is the science of how aesthetic experiences can change our body and our brain and our behavior. It's about understanding why some spaces feel like just right, and how elements like form and color and texture and light can actually measure it. You can measure the impact on our mood and our well-being from that. Actually, our journey with neuroaesthetics began back in 2019, also in Milan, with an exhibition called The Space for Being. We did this in collaboration with Google and with Ready Made Architecture and Johns Hopkins University. And the whole show and the idea behind it was to explore how people respond both consciously and unconsciously to different environments. And this just gave us a language to something that we might have been doing intuitively. And I think that many designers do intuitively, designing not just furniture, but also whole atmospheres. It's not about decorating a room, it's about shaping an emotional experience. Yes. So building on our work with neuroaesthetics, this year's exhibition in Milan, we set out to explore how design shapes not only what we see, but how we feel when we move through a space. So we were inspired by the rhythm of the year and its seasons, and how these seasons shifts and how those shifts affect our mood and our pace and our emotions. And it became the foundation for the exhibition concept, which was a sensory journey through 6 different rooms, each capturing the essence of a specific season. So each space was carefully composed using light and color and actually scent and texture to evoke not just a setting, but kind of a state of mind as well. So we wanted people to move through the space room by room and not just see different designs, but to really feel like there was a shift in the atmosphere from one room to the next, and not just in small changes, but like in deliberate contrast. So from warm and energized to more quiet and contemplative and so on. And now I'll take you through that tour to the best of my PowerPoint presentation ability, and let's take it room by room. So as you enter the apartment, you were met with something quite unexpected. There's a room that was entirely washed in a vivid red color. It was very bold, almost like overwhelming at first, but that was very intentional. And this is actually the entrance of the exhibition. So we wanted it to feel kind of like a jolt to the senses and a space that, immediately shifted your energy. So both the walls and the ceilings and the curtains, they were all enveloped in this beautiful, powerful red hue. And throughout the space, we placed different flower installation that really added life and movement in there. And then on the screen in the background, there was a little video with a slow-moving sky, like blue and open with passing clouds, which was a really nice contrast between the red and this blue sky that set like an emotional tone of warmth and energy and optimism. Just like that truly warm first day of the year when you step outside and suddenly feel everything feels kind of brighter. So this space was about making people feel awake and present and not a traditional welcome. And it worked out really well.
Signe, to stop you quickly, Josh
Mm.
had a question about how do you measure the impact of the neuroaesthetic ambition in an activation like this? And are you doing any interactions with the attendees or inviting press to interact with the space? How is that working out?
No, yeah, so maybe Josh is referring to what we did back in 2019 with Google, because the whole concept of that was actually putting on a bracelet and you would move through different rooms and yeah, measure people's reaction to the different rooms. And that was a big setup, and unfortunately we were not able to do the same in here. So it's more of talking to the our visitors and get a feeling of how they felt when they moved through the space. um, and I think one thing everyone really reacted strongly to was this room, the entrance, because it was kind of like either you love it or you don't, but it was hard to ignore, if that makes sense. So to answer his question, we did not do anything like um, with like quantitatively measuring the effect of your body's response to the spaces. But I'll move on. Yeah, so from the bold energy of the red room, you step into something much lighter. The space here is inspired by the sea and the sky. So the palette shifts from soft, or shifts to these soft, airy tones. And everything kind of felt more calm and more expansive, but still very much this summer vibe, but just a different kind of summer, not like the intensity of the sun, but more of a dreaminess, like a trip by the coast or by the sea. And at the center of the room was our in situ sofa, and it was upholstered in the Nova textile, which is this gradient pattern textile from Meheram. And it has this beautiful kind of wave-like movement to it, and the pattern just kind of shifts across the surface and almost makes it look like it's light moving across water. So this room was about letting go of tension and slowing down, and a bit more chill vibe. It's still summer, but more soft. Yes. And as we move from the airy summer space into the next room, the atmosphere really shifts a lot. So we wanted to create a very clear emotional transition here. So coming out of the vibrant, uplifting spaces, this room brings us into something more introspective. It was inspired by autumn, a season of really slowing down, turning inwards, and finding comfort. This draws the colors draws from nature's darker, more earthy tones. So those burnt shades that maybe is more associated with colder days. Yeah, and a palette that kind of grounds and calms you. So we designed the space to be very multifunctional. So it's both like a living room, or it could be like a lobby setting, that just felt very open and flexible. So with large sofas and lounge chairs, that kind of invited different, seating and moments like gathering or relaxing with a book, or simply just enjoying a pause. So here we also showcase several of our pieces in new ways. There was the Connect Soft modular sofa in two different versions, the short version in a grace leather, and then a longer version that was upholstered in this Meheram flint textile that has this beautiful, almost moss-like quality to it. Very subtle and very organic, but it spoke really well into this fall atmosphere that we wanted to create. And then our new mixed coffee table was also making its debut in this room. Yes. Yeah. So from the warm tones of fall, we step into a smaller, more quieter space, designed as a crisp, focused office setting. And this room really takes inspiration from winter. So not in a cold and like distant way, but as a season of reflection. So time to withdraw, to slow down, and kind of find clarity. So the atmosphere is clean and still, shaped by a palette of soft white colors, but also pale neutral colors. And actually, all of the walls are covered with these white tiles with a very subtle texture that just really catches the light beautifully throughout the day. We also worked with a mix of materials in here to create that feeling. So you had like the cooler, more sculptural objects like the set lamp and the gaze mirror. And we kind of balanced that out by softer elements like the hearth upholstered fiber chair. And you'll also see some of our new launches here. There was the new height of the beam table lamp and our new restore basket sizes. So we really wanted this room to offer a quiet pause in the exhibition and a moment to turn inward and reflect and reset. Yes, and as we step into the dining room, the atmosphere shifts again, and this time into something lighter, more hopeful. This space was inspired by early spring, that moment when everything feels like it's just about to bloom, and there's like a sense of renewal and a quiet optimism, like something new is just about to begin. So we work with a lot of natural materials in here to bring that feeling to life. The curtain in the background actually had this wooden pattern, pattern. And we worked a lot with different green tones, textured surfaces, the wooden materials in the chair, and fresh flowers that made the whole thing come to life. And at the center of the space was the midst dining table that was actually shown here as a preview for September with a new gray marble top. So this stone just brings a very refined and grounded presence to the space. It has this really soft veining and very subtle blue-gray colors. And this natural material and its matte finish and really soft feeling just really complemented the surrounding materials and made it work as both like an anchor and a contrast, but just tying the whole space together quite well. Mm-hmm. Yes. And the final room of the apartment brings us into the kitchen. It was a continuation of the spring atmosphere that was established in the dining room, but this room kind of carries the same sense of hope and anticipation and renewal, like something sprouting or taking root. And we worked with natural materials again and a lot of fresh organic elements to bring that to life. So the space featured our wooden linear steels or linear system series. And on top of that, we had a lot of our rich planters that we filled with fresh herbs, but also actually using a lot of vegetables as styling that was placed throughout the room to add this sense of vitality. So that brings us to the end of the apartment tour and a full circle of the year. We went from something vibrant and energetic to something quiet and introspective. And I think we were all really proud with what we managed to create here and to really make these atmospheres that are just as important as of course, the designed objects we placed in it. But let's step outside and take a look at our second location during Design Week, which was the Muuto Garden. And as I mentioned earlier, it's actually just a short 5-minute walk from the apartment and still right in the heart of Brea. We created this second experience, which was the Muuto Garden. So we were really lucky to find a truly special spot. It's a very calm green courtyard that's tucked away, but is still in the middle of the busy city. So during the week, we transformed it into a little outdoor oasis, and we filled it with all of our outdoor collection. And it just offered a chance to do something different, to step outside and create space for our guests to gather and slow down and connect with each other. Yeah, so the Muuto Garden was hosted at a spot that some of you might know. It's a wine bar that's called Associazione Salumi e Vini Naturali. It's a local favorite in Brea. It's known for its biodynamic wines and high quality charcuterie and cheeses, and it just really has this very nice contemporary easygoing vibe that really works well and resonates with our own values. And all in your steel furniture was shown in this light blue color, as well as a galvanized steel that just really complemented the courtyard beautifully. And it turned out to look really relaxed, but still feeling, distinctively modern and Scandinavian. And there's actually a quite lovely story behind the courtyard itself. So back when the wine bar first opened, the courtyard wasn't part of it, but the owners kind of noticed something on Google Maps. It was like a green patch that was tucked behind the surrounding buildings. So they were, of course, really curious and they looked into it. And eventually they got the permission from the city of Milan to investigate it. And they actually uncovered a hidden ruin, so a structure from the Second World War that had been locked, walled off, and forgotten about, and in there, nature had just taken over, for decades, and the plants had been growing freely and undisturbed for years. So they cleared just enough to make the space usable, but left a lot of it intact. And it has this really quiet and wild beauty now and is part of the restaurant. And a very special, almost like a little secret garden in the middle of the Brea district. Yeah, so the garden gave us the perfect chance to show our newest outdoor series, which is the Settle series. It's actually our first soft seating lounge collection, and it's designed by Andersen and Wall. Settle was born out of this simple idea of what if we could take the comfort of indoor lounging and bring it outside. And the name kind of says it all. It's like a series that invites you to relax and to sink in and just settle into the furniture. And it turned out to be the perfect choice for the Muuto Garden, where guests could just drop by and settle into the sofas with a glass of wine and just enjoy, the calm of this hidden spot in the middle of the city. Yeah, so that was a little journey through our Milan experience and exhibitions, from the apartment to the garden. I hope it gave you a sense of who we are and how we approach design. And if you want to learn more, you can always visit muuto.com to learn more about us or neuroaesthetics and even see more of what went down during Milan. Or you can go to Instagram, of course, TikTok, and follow us where our handle is Muuto Design. Yeah. And then I hope to see many of you, or we hope to see many of you in a few weeks for Design Days in Chicago. And maybe there might even be people going to Copenhagen for 3 days of design, which is also in June. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Signe.
Yeah, sure.
That was awesome. I can echo Polly wrote in that she loves this area of Milan, and I think all of us are trying to figure out a way to have a trip there and go to that wine bar. It seems amazing. And the way you pulled the neuroaesthetics to your brand moments and how the product can support that, it's really beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing Muuto. Now we're going to turn it over to Jonathan Olivares to talk about how Knoll at Salone.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Here, let me share my screen. There we go. How's this working?
Great. Thank you.
Great. Okay, cool. Yeah, so thank you. I'm the design director for Knoll. I work on product, spaces, art direction for photography, kind of anything on the creative side of the brand, and have been doing so for 3 years. So I wanted to give a quick recap of sort of like what Knoll is today, leading up to sort of the thinking behind what we did in Milan. So Milan primarily for us, it's an expression of space. We have new product, but in some ways, the spaces we make help us identify the products that we may miss. Knoll is not really a furniture company, it's an interiors company. It was founded on the idea of interior design, and actually Florence Knoll kind of invented in the field of interior design. So all Knoll's products are really conceived for interiors and architecture. So that's why our spaces play such an important role in what the brand is and how we do it. And I wanted to start with two designers that we work with on our interiors, Salem van der Swa and Pernilla Orsted. They are a kind of textile designer, Salem, and color materials specialist, and then Pernilla is an architect. And so together, working with them, we've realized a number of flagship showrooms over the last few years, and I kind of give this as a background to why and what we did in Milan. So this was Chicago, which we opened 2 years ago, a kind of light-filled space where the furniture was done, of course, in program to the building, a very Miesian space in terms of its curtains. Dallas, very different situation with an interior courtyard, in the sense of like what you do in the interior should reflect what's happening in the building and on the outside. We brought this we had a lot of trees both in the core and on the street side, and so rather than fight the color green, we kind of embraced it. And brought it in, but also just planned a comprehensive office from hospitality and amenity to open plan to private office. This is our retail shop in London. Again, just to, when we do interiors, we think of them, or when we do showrooms and retail shops, we make them full interiors to demonstrate that Knoll's ability to kind of be a partner for architects and designers to make their own interiors. So every time we do a new location, we do a totally different concept, usually responding to the neighborhood and the architecture. And this is the New York City flagship that we opened last fall on Park Avenue South. This is a temporary installation that we did in Los Angeles right before Salone. It's a installation at the Frank Gehry Baldessari studio in Los Angeles where we debuted the bun lounge chair that you see in the foreground in front of the pillow sofa. It was a really fun, 2-day event with press and a dinner. And again, like another way to furnish a space, and while we furnish the space, we realize oh, we actually missed something. So maybe we should have this or that. That's how we inform our future product development. So this year in Milan, we worked with a number of protagonists in the fields of interior design, architecture, and sculpture. Again, I want to underscore Knoll. It's not because it's an interiors company. We don't actually work with typical product designers or industrial designers. We work with architects, interior designers, and sculptors because they are a little bit more, rather than focusing on making an object, we're really focusing on making a space. And so the protagonists that we work with at Knoll are really kind of at the vanguard of space making via those three disciplines I mentioned. So Willow Perron is a Canadian, Los Angeles-based kind of designer who works across interior architecture, runway shows, concert design, and also residential interiors. Joe Durso, we relaunched a product of his from the 1980s from Knoll. He was really in some ways shaped the minimal design movement of the 1980s in New York City. He was a really important interior designer of that time, and we brought back something of his that I'll show later that has real resonance in today's interiors. Johnston Markley, Los Angeles-based architects. They have done, the UCLA graduate centers in Los Angeles, the Knoll Drawing Institute in Houston, Dropbox headquarters, so many residences and art galleries that are super noteworthy. They were the curators of the Chicago Architecture Biennial, and Mark Lee was the chair of Harvard's Graduate School of Design. So it's very exciting to work with them on a sofa that you'll see that really kind of harnesses the language of their architecture into an interior object. Jonathan Mickey is a Minneapolis-based architect and sculptor. Knoll has produced the first ever piece of furniture that Jonathan did for, kind of serial production that isn't for a gallery or a one-off for a space. And then finally, Kirsten Geers and David van Severen, Belgian-based architects. We worked with them to actually design the architecture of our pavilion, or we call it the Casa Knoll in Milan. And that's sort of, again, like it sets the tone for what we do, how we think about how we arrange our furniture, but also how we identify what's missing in our market. I sort of briefed them to say, like, hey, we're going to the furniture fair, the Salone del Mobile. It's a very commercial event in a massive contract, kind of a contract environment, trade fair environment. I personally don't like spending time in fairgrounds. So can you make me a house instead of a stand? Like, I don't want a booth. I don't want a stand. I want a house that I can live in. And I want something that I can reuse multiple years in a row, that's recyclable, made of recycled materials, and reconfigurable. Just because a lot of the stands that you find at the Salone del Mobile fair are disposable, built from scratch every year. There's a huge amount of waste that happens. And I mean, sustainability aside, like, I just find that to be kind of, yeah, disgusting to see, like, bins getting filled in with stuff at the end of the year, and it's just a sloppy, it's like a non-architectural approach. So the brief to Kirsten and David were like, make us architecture. And so here you have the image that you see from the aisle of the Knoll Pavilion. This is the welcoming space. We do a couple of moves there every year to make sure that it feels like a residence inside. One is we have a queue. So we only let a certain amount of people on the booth at one time so that it feels like maybe a cocktail party, not like a slammed commercial trade fair. The other move that we do is we bring in noise canceling machines around the perimeter of the space, and we pump in some of my own, like, personal music. I think of it as like, okay, we're hosting a party for people. The pavilion itself is made out of aluminum extrusions, which are 100% recyclable. The floor is a terrazzo made from reclaimed concrete from the building industry. Every year we bring in new interior gardens. This industry of what do you call them? Nurseries. The nursery industry is actually a carbon negative industry, so it's good to support them. We rent these, and then they go back to the nurseries and they're sold. So yeah, this is sort of like, you walk in, it's a little bit of a palate cleanser from the commercial environment of the fair. And then you enter the space, which is like, the reference for Kirsten and David was like kind of a Mies Craig Elwood desert house, like a case study house, something from the mid-century, but done in a contemporary way. Years ago, the Knoll's designers are people that I've known for a decade or more. I really kind of always say, like, Knoll hired my community. They didn't hire me. And Kirsten and David and I had actually spoken about building a house in Palm Springs before the pandemic, and things got, pandemicized, and it never happened. But this was kind of this is the idea that we had of, like, a very flexible frame system that can be reconfigured, be porous, be closed off, as it's sort of blending the interior and exterior landscapes. I'll just quickly walk you through product that we debuted. So this is actually a sofa called the Pillow Sofa by Willow Perron. We showed it last year for the first time. It's been a kind of cultural hit in the market. It's been really cool to see people use it. Willow had actually done this for one of his clients' homes, a rapper that he does concert design for, and the sofa was really designed to like allow this kind of rapper and his friends to kind of like smoke weed, play video games, lounge out. I think it's at Knoll again, like we don't make objects, we always draw knowledge from the architectural tendencies and the patterns of living that are changing out there. And I think the pandemic saw the sofa become far more relaxed than it had ever been. And I think with streaming and recreational drug use and gaming, like I think, okay, maybe that's not for everybody, but the culture as a whole is shifting towards a far less formal sofa typology. And I think Pillow really captured that. It's sort of based on a single idea, right? Like the repetition of a pillow. It's sort of very large, but because it's made of smaller pillows with crisper edges, you read it as being a little slimmer. So again, like last year, we inhabited this house in a different way, and it became really evident. Like we don't actually have a lounge chair that pairs with the pillow sofa, so that became an immediate hole, kind of gap to fill. And Willow and we worked on this bun lounge chair, which is the same seating height as the pillow sofa, a very similar posture, but a freestanding kind of more, let's say, iconic lounge chair that pairs well with the sofa, both visually but also conceptually. Like the pillow sofa is based on a pillow, and the bun lounge chair is based on a futon. So these are kind of very informal. I think Willow, being in Los Angeles, embraces a very kind of informal way of life that gets channeled through these pieces. In the background of some of these, you may have seen some of this artwork. For me, it's very important if we're inhabiting a home, like we have furniture, we have finishes, but we also have contemporary art. So we commissioned these paintings from Gregory Shimada, who's part of the kind of post-mission school anti-style movement in the Bay Area. So it's spray paint on canvas. I mentioned Joe Durso, the 1980s collaborator of Knoll. He's actually been a collaborator since the 80s. He did some work in the aughts and early teens, and we're really excited to bring back his series of coffee tables and occasional tables. These are really the first minimalist pieces ever done in the canon of design. Like if you look at that 1970s Donald Judd movement of art in New York, Joe Durso was the first design protagonist to take that language and adapt it to furniture. And these are kind of monumental, minimalist metal tables with glass tops. They're actually on wheels, so they're very easy to move around. And to me, like when I mine the archives for Knoll, I do not look for like style and nostalgia. I only look for things that are relevant for today's patterns of living. And I think that like given the increase in size of the sofas and we like to store things, we like to have books, we like to have controllers. But also we're a little flexible. Things need to move around today. And so I think these tables really make a lot of sense in today's landscape. Behind that, Joe Durso's tables, you would have seen a sofa. This sofa in the foreground here is Johnston Markley's first furniture collaboration with Knoll. It's called the Biboni, which is a kind of portmanteau of the bibendum, which is the original, the kind of Latin term for the Michelin Man. Bibendum means, I think, to drink freely. The Michelin Man or bibendum comes from I believe the really turn of the last century when Michelin was sponsoring these like driving and drinking tours, which sounds like crazy today, but that's kind of where the Michelin stars evolved from, was this tour of like driving to different vineyards with Michelin tires, sponsored by Michelin, to drink. And so there comes the name Bibendum. And so the Biboni sofa is really about kind of capturing the geometries of the Michelin Man, which is actually inspired. I'll sort of really quickly flip back here. If you look at some of the shapes in Johnston Markley's work, like those Michelin men on the table are actually Markley's personal collection of Michelin men. They're vintage pieces he's collected over the years, and they really inform the vocabulary, the volumes, the geometries, the humanistic curvatures that are so typical and prominent in Johnston Markley's architecture. And so to be able to translate that into a sofa, again, like Knoll responds to interiors and the way they're moving. But another part of Knoll's DNA is that it actually captures the architectural zeitgeist in pieces of furniture. So if you think about the Barcelona chair, how it kind of bottles up the attitude of the Barcelona house, of symmetry, of classicist modernism, hedonism of materials. The Biboni sofa sort of does that for Johnston Markley's architecture. So the humanistic curvatures, the repetition of form, the balance, proportions, generosity, these things appear in the sofa as well. Next and last in terms of product, I want to speak a little bit about Jonathan Mickey, the Minneapolis-based architect and sculptor I mentioned. So his sculptural works, which we've been commissioning for Knoll showrooms now for 3 years, and you would have seen them in Los Angeles and Dallas and New York and our Chicago showrooms. For me, it was very important to kind of harness his sculptural approach into a piece of furniture that we can make available to clients. Very similar to the pattern established with Harry Bertoia and Knoll in the mid-century, right? So he was a sculptor, and then he kind of translated that sculptural attitude into the Bertoia chair, which has been in production for 70 plus years. So with Jonathan Mickey, we focused on doing the same thing. This is the Mickey Wood collection. The main concept for Jonathan's sculpture and his furniture is actually to reduce the number of decisions down to a minimum and to create something that's immediately recognizable to the eye, and its construction is also understandable to the eye. And so we have these chairs and tables, both in 3 woods, a dark, a light, and a medium. They're architectural, they're rectilinear. I sometimes think of them as like a structural diagram of themselves, in the sense that every element is there to support another element. You can't take anything away without compromising the structure of the chair, but at the same time, it's extremely comfortable in terms of its seat curvatures and armrest placements, and it's a very good weight as well. So we see it as like a residential and contract piece. And then lastly, my role at Knoll, one of the exciting parts about Knoll is to kind of preserve the legacy, but for me, like preserving the legacy actually means like moving it forward. So like one of my favorite art directors, Mike Murray, at one point he kind of got in a lot of trouble in the graphic design community for stretching fonts for the cover of 032C. And I remember reading an interview with him where he said, like, look, if you love modernism and you actually want to keep it alive, you have to be willing to fuck with it. And that's a little bit how I feel with the Knoll classics. So like here you have the Barcelona chair in raceway yellow with a black frame, like looking at like, Lamborghini and Porsche motorsports, kind of getting rid of some of these dogmas that Mies could only be in chrome and black leather. Like the Bauhaus and Mies and even early Donnet production, they used primary and secondary colors. They painted frames. Here in the back, you see another artwork commissioned by Dozie Kanu, who's a Nigerian-American sculptor that we're working with on a furniture collection that will debut next year. And that's a sculpture of his in the back that kind of uses a washing machine drum and drum kit components and turns them into a lamp, which is also black and yellow that kind of fits the scene here. Again, like, showing the classics in a new way, in a new architectural environment. Here you have the Brno chairs and the Plattner table with new vases, a little preview of some accessories Knoll will be doing next year. These are Sam Chermayeff, the American architect in Berlin. And then finally, just like pairing colors and contrast and creating an atmosphere. And I think that the most powerful feedback I got from the Knoll Casa Knoll Pavilion was that like people couldn't quite put their finger on why it was so exciting. And was it the furniture? Was it the architecture? Was it the atmosphere? Was it the music? Was it all of those things, the artwork? And I think what we've done is, I think what I'm most proud of, because I don't actually design these spaces or the furniture, so I can say somewhat objectively, like my role at Knoll is to kind of almost like gathering people at a dinner party and seeing, does the chemistry produce a party and are people dancing on the table at 4 in the morning? And so I feel like we've started to achieve this with Knoll, where the atmosphere is the right atmosphere and the people are the right people and the work that's being produced is the kind of right work. Yeah, so thank you very much. That's all for now.
Thank you, Jonathan. I love that reference to the party at 4 in the morning. It seems like that what was going on at Milan was really energizing. Thank you for that. Wondering if anybody has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat for the last couple of minutes. One question that we have is, how are some of the elements from Milan going to show up or influence Chicago Design Days coming up on June 9th to 11th? I know some of the audience members may be attending Design Days.
Signe, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely our showroom. You should go by and you can see most of the furniture that I also showed you here. We're hoping to get the big mid table with the new marble tabletop ready for Chicago as well. But the Settle series will be there, and also some of the other new exciting stuff.
Cool. Yeah, we for Knoll, like for us, Milan is very much like a residential opportunity. Some of those things do cross over into like hospitality or hosting amenity spaces in both in the hospitality restaurant or a workplace business. But the emphasis for us in Chicago is really on workplace platforms this year. So we have a new, very exciting, totally new work platform called Dividend Skyline. And it's meant to like really think about the contemporary open plan and some of the tendencies that we're responding to and paving the way for the future for our A&D partners in terms of like how do you integrate, how do you bring privacy and a first-class experience into the post-pandemic open plan? How do you kind of host the people who may be giving up private offices for amenity space? How do you deal with the flight to quality and condensing floor plans? And so it's a really like fully thought out system that's solving a lot of problems that we see in the market and also kind of leading the way for the future of planning. So we're very excited about that. We'll have the Johnston Markley Biboni sofa and the Jonathan Mickey chair in a kind of what we call the culture alley, which is like a kind of indoor-outdoor garden that kind of separates the two the larger workplace spaces that Knoll has. So yeah.
Great, sounds fun. Hope some of you are joining. And John Hurwitz just put in a link to millerknoll.com for the Design Days page in case you need more information. We hope to see many of you there. One last question before we wrap up. Any overall impressions of this year's Salone Milan Design Week that you want to share?
Yeah, we're happy to. Signe, do you have any thoughts?
Well, we talked about this before, but I actually didn't really get to see much of Milan except for the apartment because it was so busy.
Yeah.
So I don't have that much input for you, but I know that Jonathan does.
Yeah, I mean, so what I do and what I've done for a long, maybe a decade now at this point is what I do is I ask during I get there Friday, Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. I'm just kind of like breakfasts and I'm listening to my community of peers, like what's interesting, what's going on. And then I take the day Thursday, no meetings, and I just get a car and bam, 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 hit all the shows that my community had mentioned. This year, I mean, I think that there's some larger like macroeconomic tendencies that have really changed the fair over the last 20 years since I started going. The one is like obviously globalization, right? Like the fair has become so international that you have companies from all over the world premiering there. Another one is that it's become an experiential event, experiential marketing event for big fashion and big automotive. So you'll see like, from Hermes to Range Rover, a lot of the prime real estate in the city center is being rented for experiential marketing by major brands that are not in the furniture industry. I think kind of condensation within the furniture industry, so mergers and acquisitions, you're starting to see like a little bit more of like a corporate approach happening versus it used to maybe be a little bit more independent. The cultural institutions like the Triennale are still there. They still kind of hold their ground. And then I think what I've noticed is actually like a significant decrease in platforms for young designers. I think like as some of that prime real estate has been taken by the big fashion brands, then the medium B real estate is taken by the furniture companies, and maybe that was something that would have been an independent exhibition or something more on the cultural side. I definitely see like a kind of movement towards fashion, automotive, and away from actually like design in a way. So maybe 3 days is the future. Who knows,
Thank you, Jonathan and Signe.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you sharing everything that happened with Knoll and Muuto in Milan this year. Just so that everyone knows, this is a monthly design series. We will skip next month, though, because of the very, very busy design days in Chicago. And we'll be sending out invitations and announcing July's design perspectives in the next month or so. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And if you missed this or want to recap, it will be posted on YouTube on our Miller Knoll channel in a couple of days. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.